The conference room smelled like ozone, and that particular brand of desperate ambition that only comes from a mid-level executive wearing a tie that cost more than his monthly car payment. I sat there staring at a coffee ring on the glass table, listening to the new director of operations, a guy named Jordan Walsh, who had been with TechFlow Dynamics for exactly 96 hours. Jordan looked like he was assembled in a LinkedIn influencer factory. His teeth were too white for a Texas summer. His tan was spray bottle orange, and his vocabulary consisted entirely of words like synergy, pivot, and agile transformation. He couldn't tell a server from a microwave, but here he was holding my career in his manicured hands. I'm Ryan Brooks, by the way. 49 years old. Been building network infrastructure since before the cloud was just something that made you cancel weekend fishing plans. Ryan, Jordan said, leaning forward and clasping his hands together in what was definitely a power pose he learned from a YouTube tutorial. We've been analyzing the operational efficiency of our legacy systems architecture. Frankly, your position represents a structural bottleneck. We're pivoting to a more dynamic, cloud-native approach. I didn't say anything. I just looked at him. I've been in this business for 25 years. Started in the Air Force doing IT security, then spent the last 15 years building TechFlow's back-end infrastructure. I hand-coded the security protocols that process $4 million in daily transactions. I'm the reason the CEO can check his portfolio from his yacht in Galveston without wondering if some hacker in Romania is buying Bitcoin with his money. But to Jordan, I was just some guy in a polo shirt and work boots who didn't get excited about stand-up meetings and sprint retrospectives. Effective immediately, Jordan continued, sliding a single sheet of paper across the mahogany table. Your employment is terminated. I need you to hand over system credentials and access tokens before you leave today. HR has your severance package ready. I looked at the paper. Standard termination letter, probably drafted by some paralegal who was currently scrolling TikTok. It was insulting, sure, but mostly it was funny. Funny in the way a toddler playing with a loaded gun is funny. Terrifying, absurd, and destined to end with someone getting hurt. I'm afraid I cannot do that, I said. My voice was calm, the same voice I used when a junior admin accidentally took down the email server. Flat, matter of fact. Jordan's smile faltered for about half a second. Excuse me? This isn't a negotiation, Ryan. This is a directive. I understand English just fine, Jordan, I said, leaning back in my chair. But you're asking for something you don't understand. I can't just hand over the system. The infrastructure isn't a set of passwords you write on a sticky note. It's biometric-locked sovereignty architecture. And according to the specific language in my employment contract, which I assume you read, I'm the designated root owner, he laughed. That short, barking laugh that insecure people make when they're trying to sound confident. We have an IT department, Ryan. We'll reset your credentials. Just give us the hardware token and clean out your desk. I looked at him. Really looked at him. Saw the arrogance covering up the complete lack of understanding. It's a common flavor in corporate management these days. I don't think you grasp the situation, I said quietly. If I walk out that door without completing the formal 30-day joint transition protocol specified in my contract, the system interprets it as a hostile takeover attempt. It's a fail-safe. I built it that way to protect the company from external breaches and internal stupidity. We'll take our chances, Jordan sneered, standing up and adjusting his tie. Security will escort you out. Leave your badge on the table. I stood up. Didn't argue. Didn't raise my voice. I felt that familiar cold sensation in my chest. Not anger, just the clinical detachment of watching someone insist on stepping on a landmine. I placed my badge on the table. It made a hollow click. All right, Jordan, I said. It's Friday afternoon. I'm going to head home and work on my boat. I suggest you call Mason Hayes in accounting. Tell him you just saved the company my salary. I'm sure he'll be thrilled. I walked out of the room. The glass door hissed shut behind me. I walked past the server room, past the rows of blinking blue lights that were currently humming along in perfect harmony, orchestrated by scripts I wrote at 3 a.m. during a system migration 4 years ago. I walked past the open plan office where young developers sat wearing noise-canceling headphones, completely unaware that their digital world was about to collapse. I took the elevator down to the lobby. The security guard, an older guy named Danny Kim, who I'd shared barbecue lunches with for 6 years, looked confused when I handed him my parking pass. "Leaving early, Ryan?" he asked. "Yeah, Danny," I said, grabbing my jacket. "Permanent vacation. You might want to keep your phone handy. It's going to get real interesting on the 12th floor." I walked out into the Austin heat, got in my F-150, tossed my laptop bag in the passenger seat, and drove away. I didn't look back. I didn't feel sorry for myself. I just checked my watch. It was 1:30 p.m. The automated compliance sweep ran at 8 o'clock p.m. Jordan had exactly 6 hours and 30 minutes before he realized he hadn't just fired an employee. He'd fired the only person who knew how to keep the engine running. My garage workshop is a lot like my code, organized, efficient, and built to last. I spent Saturday morning working on the outboard motor for my base boat, getting ready for Sunday's fishing trip to Lake Travis. The Texas heat was already brutal at 9 a.m., but I love the focus it requires. No distractions, just problem solving. My phone was inside on the kitchen counter. I'd turned the ringer off. A bold move for someone who'd spent the last decade on call 24/7, sleeping with a laptop within arm's reach. But I wasn't on call anymore. I was unemployed. While I was torquing down spark plugs 15 miles away at TechFlow headquarters, the digital ecosystem I'd built was starting to panic. Here's the thing about the security architecture I designed. It wasn't just a bunch of servers and a rack, it was a living, breathing organism. When I implemented the cloud migration strategy 8 years ago, the board was terrified of data breaches. They wanted Fort Knox in the sky, so I gave them Fort Knox, complete with a dead man's switch. The system required regular biometric authentication from me, the root administrator, to authorize any major changes. If my user status was changed to terminated without the corresponding cryptographic handoff protocol, the system assumed the network had been compromised by hostile actors. It wasn't malicious. It was a security feature they paid me overtime to install. They just forgot it existed. Around noon, I went inside to grab a beer and check the weather for tomorrow's fishing. I glanced at my personal tablet, a secure device I kept for system monitoring. A single notification blinked on the screen. Alert. Unauthorized user removal detected. Root ownership orphaned. Initiating Level 1 defense protocols. I took a sip of my Lone Star. It was ice cold and perfect. Back at the office, things were getting interesting. Jordan, in his infinite wisdom, had decided to clean house over the weekend. He'd instructed Logan Pierce, the IT manager, a nervous guy who I'd mentored through 3 major system upgrades, to strip my access immediately. "Just delete his accounts," Jordan had probably said, sipping his kale smoothie. "We need to show we're in control." Logan tried. He logged into the admin console, found my user profile, and clicked deactivate. That click was the digital equivalent of cutting the wrong wire on a bomb. Down in the server room, there was a junior admin named Alex Rodriguez. Good kid, self-taught, eager to learn. He messaged me on Signal around 3 p.m. I saw the notification pop up but didn't open it. The preview read, "Ryan, WTF is happening? Dashboard turning red. Logan killed your admin access and now the load balancers locked us out. Jordan's freaking out. Please tell me this is a drill." I didn't reply. Couldn't, legally. I was no longer authorized to interact with company systems or personnel regarding proprietary data. Responding would violate the termination agreement Jordan was so eager to enforce. I went back to the garage and started organizing my tackle box. The defense protocol I'd written was designed to stop ransomware attacks. Step 1 was isolation. It immediately severed connections to all non-whitelisted IP addresses. Since Jordan had authorized a change the system interpreted as an attack, the system decided the office itself was the threat. By 4 p.m., the internal email server stopped syncing. By 6 p.m., the VPN kicked everyone off. By 8 p.m., the automated compliance bots, nasty little scripts that audit GDPR and SOX regulations, woke up for their evening sweep. They looked for the root administrator to verify data integrity. They found nothing, just a void where my digital signature used to be. The bots did what they were programmed to do. They flagged a critical security breach. I grilled some burgers on the back patio and listened to the cicadas. The silence from my phone was deafening. Beautiful, actually. I knew that right now, in a glass office downtown, Jordan was probably yelling at a monitor, demanding to know why he couldn't access his email. He probably thought the internet was down. He had no idea he'd just triggered a cascading failure that would cost TechFlow more per hour than he made in a month. I cracked another beer. It tasted like vindication. Monday mornings in corporate America usually smell like burnt coffee and existential dread, but this Monday was special. This Monday had electricity in the air. I woke up at 6:30 out of habit, made myself some scrambled eggs and checked the base fishing forecast for next weekend. While I was eating breakfast, Mason Hayes, TechFlow's CFO, was receiving the most expensive email of his career. Well, technically, he wasn't receiving it on his work account because the email servers were locked down. He got it on his personal phone via emergency alert from the external auditing firm that monitors our compliance status. I can recite that alert from memory because I wrote the template 6 years ago. Critical security event. Level 5 breach. Unauthorized attempt to reassign cloud root ownership detected. Identity verification failed. Data exposure risk. $350 million. Escalating to board of directors. $350 million. That was the estimated value of client data, proprietary algorithms, and intellectual property sitting in the cloud containers I'd built. Right now, the system was treating all that data like it was being held hostage, because in a way, it was hostage to its own immune system. I sat at my kitchen table reading the Sunday paper. My phone, which I'd finally turned back on, started buzzing like an angry wasp. Not ringing, buzzing. Text after text after text. Unknown numbers. Numbers I recognized. The legal department, HR, Logan from IT, and of course Jordan. I let it buzz, watched it vibrate across the granite counter like a possessed hockey puck. The scene at TechFlow must have been cinematic. Mason probably sprinted down the hallway to IT, skipping the elevator because panic makes excellent cardio. He would have found the server room in chaos, screens black, junior admins sitting around looking shell-shocked, Logan sweating through his Oxford shirt trying to explain to a room full of executives why Admin 123 wasn't unlocking the core infrastructure. And Jordan was probably still trying to bluff his way through it. I could hear his voice in my head, that slick, unearned confidence. It's just a glitch, Mason. We're deploying a patch, standard maintenance hiccup, but you can't patch a missing foundation. Around 9:30 a.m., a courier showed up at my front door. Bike messenger, looked hot and annoyed. He handed me a thick envelope marked Urgent Legal. "Sign here, please," he grunted. I signed. Opened the envelope. It was a cease and desist letter drafted by TechFlow's panicked general counsel. It accused me of sabotage, malicious withholding of company property, and cyber terrorism. It demanded I immediately provide encryption keys or face federal prosecution. I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. They were threatening to arrest me for locking them out of a house they'd locked themselves out of. I walked to my home office, a room with more computing power than the space shuttle, and sat down at my personal rig. Pulled up the employment contract I'd signed 8 years ago, highlighted 2 specific clauses and saved them as a PDF. Then I opened my personal email and drafted a reply to the general counsel, copying Mason and the board's external liaison address. Subject: RE. Accusations of sabotage. Dear legal team, I am in receipt of your letter. Please be advised that I am no longer an employee of TechFlow Dynamics, having been terminated Friday at 1:30 p.m. by Director Jordan Walsh. The sabotage you are experiencing is a contractual security feature detailed in Clause 11.7 of my employment agreement. The system is functioning exactly as designed to prevent unauthorized takeovers. My biometric authentication token is the only key. However, since my contract was terminated without the required 30-day joint transition procedure, I am under no legal obligation to perform work for a non-employer. If you wish to engage my services to resolve this issue, please contact Brooks Security Consulting. My emergency rate card is attached. Best regards, Ryan Brooks. I hit send. The beauty wasn't just the money. The root token they needed was a YubiKey sitting in my desk drawer. Not on a server, not in the cloud. A piece of plastic the size of a thumb drive. Without my fingerprint to activate it, it was just expensive junk. My phone stopped buzzing for exactly 4 minutes after I sent that email. Dead silence. The silence of a room full of lawyers, realizing they'd brought a knife to a nuclear war. Then it started ringing again. This time, it was Wyatt Sterling, the chairman of the board. I wasn't in the boardroom, obviously. I was at Home Depot buying deck screws. But I've sat through enough emergency meetings to know exactly what that conference room felt like. It felt like recycled air conditioning and impending bankruptcy. Based on texts I later got from Nicole Thompson, an executive assistant who liked my straight shooting style, the emergency board meeting was called for 11 a.m. They couldn't even use the smart displays because the AV system was network dependent, and the network currently thought the building was under siege by Russian hackers, so they used a whiteboard and dry erase markers, the analog tools of defeat. Jordan walked in, reportedly still trying to maintain his swagger. Probably had a folder full of buzzwords ready: transitional friction, legacy debt, systems optimization. But the board wasn't interested in optimization. They were interested in the $350 million liability that had triggered automatic notifications to their insurance underwriters. Wyatt Sterling, a stone-faced 68-year-old who'd made his fortune in oil before pivoting to tech, was sitting at the head of the table. Sterling didn't do small talk. He did spreadsheets. And right now, his spreadsheets were hemorrhaging money. "Explain," Sterling said. "One word. No pleasantries." "It's a personnel issue," Jordan said, straightening his tie. "We terminated a legacy architect, Ryan Brooks, who'd created an overly centralized environment. He's reacting poorly. It's essentially a tantrum. We're working around it." "Working around it," Mason interrupted. He was pale. He'd seen my email. "Jordan," he didn't react. He went home. "The system locked us out because you fired the root administrator without following protocol. Did you ask for a proper handover?" Sterling's voice could have cut glass. "He refused to comply," Jordan protested. "Said he couldn't transfer access. He said the contract required a 30-day joint transition," Mason corrected, looking at a printout. "Did you read his employment contract, Jordan?" Silence. The kind of silence that could crush a human spine. I relied on HR's summary," Jordan stammered. "You fired the architect of our entire revenue stream," Sterling said, his voice dropping an octave, without reading the documentation. "You treated the backbone of a $500 million operation like it was a Gmail account." Jordan tried to pivot. "The system is flawed if one person can paralyze operations. That's exactly the bottleneck I was trying to eliminate." "It's not flawed, you idiot," another board member snapped. "It's secure. It's exactly what we contracted for after the 2019 breach. We wanted a system that couldn't be hijacked by rogue administrators. Ryan isn't the rogue here. You are." That was the moment. The crack in the facade. The realization that the shiny new director was just a wrecking ball in a business suit. Meanwhile, I was in the lumber section of Home Depot, deciding between pine and cedar for my deck repair. My phone buzzed with a text from Nicole. "Sterling just threw his pen at the wall. I think Jordan's about to cry. They want your phone number." I smiled at a display of treated 2x4s. The thing about corporate power is that it's mostly illusion. They think power is a title, the ability to fire people, corner offices with good views. But real power is infrastructure. Real power is knowing that when you stop typing, the world stops spinning. I checked my cryptocurrency wallet on my phone. Nothing yet, but I knew it was coming. The board wasn't going to sue me. They couldn't risk the discovery phase where it would come out that their operations director couldn't be bothered to read a contract. They were going to pay. I walked to checkout. The cashier, a friendly kid with paint-stained hands, asked how my day was going. "Oh, you know," I said, scanning my card. "Just watching some folks learn expensive lessons about reading the fine print." Back in the boardroom, the conversation had shifted from "how do we punish him" to "how much does he want?" They were running numbers. Cost of complete system rebuild, 8 months, $75 million, plus lost revenue, plus client defections. Cost of paying Ryan's consulting fee, expensive but immediate. It wasn't really a choice. It was a hostage negotiation where they'd taken themselves hostage. The devil is in the addendums. Specifically, Addendum C, Section 12.3 of the employment contract I'd signed 8 years ago. While I was unloading lumber in my garage, TechFlow's legal team was dissecting that document like biblical scholars trying to interpret the apocalypse. Here's what they were reading. Clause 11.7, Root Administrator Sovereignty. The contractor, Ryan Brooks, retains primary system authentication until formal transfer occurs via A. Biometric verification from both parties, B. 30-day active transition period, and C. Notarized release of liability. Section 12.3, Breach of Separation Protocol. In event of immediate termination without procedures outlined in 11.7, system shall interpret as hostile removal. Root ownership remains with contractor. All company credentials downgraded to guest status. Reactivation requires contractor's physical presence and biometric authentication. Airtight. I'd written it that way not to hold anyone hostage, but because I'd seen this movie before. I'd watched companies fire experienced staff, hire cheap replacements, then blame the old guard when everything exploded. If the ship was going down, I wanted documented proof I wasn't at the helm. Around 1 p.m., I got another email. This one from the General Counsel, but the tone had shifted dramatically. Gone were the threats of federal prosecution. Now it sounded like a desperate ex trying to get back together. Subject: urgent. Consulting engagement. Opportunity. Dear Mr. Brooks, upon further review of contractual documentation, we believe there may have been a miscommunication regarding your departure circumstances. We would like to discuss immediate reinstatement of your position to facilitate proper system transition. Please contact us at your earliest convenience. Miscommunication. Corporate speak for we stepped on a landmine. I didn't reply immediately. Let them marinate in their panic. Instead, I sat down at my computer and opened a blank invoice template. Brooks Security Consulting had never actually billed anyone. It was just a shell company for tax purposes. Today, it was going to make its first sale. I typed the line items: emergency system recovery, flat rate, weekend service, premium breach of contract, penalty, per section 12.3 inconvenience fee. The total was a number that would buy a very nice lake house or a small aircraft. It was obscene. It was 3 times my annual salary. It was non-negotiable. Back at TechFlow, the situation was deteriorating by the hour. The guest status mentioned in section 12.3 had kicked in. This meant the servers were running, but no one could change anything. They couldn't update the website. They couldn't process transactions. They couldn't even update the employee birthday calendar. They were frozen in time, and clients were starting to notice. I checked social media. A few customers were complaining. Is TechFlow down? Getting weird error messages. Can't log into my account, says guest access only. I took screenshots, added them to a folder labeled evidence. This wasn't about revenge. I didn't hate TechFlow. I loved the systems I'd built there. They were elegant, logical structures. Watching them lock down was like watching a well-trained guard dog bite an intruder. I wasn't happy about the bite, but I was proud of the training. I finally replied to the General Counsel. Subject: consulting engagement. I am not interested in reinstatement. That bridge has been burned by your operations team. However, Brooks Security Consulting is available for emergency crisis management. Attached is a statement of work and invoice for the recovery procedure. Payment terms: immediate wire transfer. Cryptocurrency preferred, but I'll accept certified funds. Once payment clears, I will arrive on site with authentication credentials. P.S. Please ensure Mr. Walsh is not present during the recovery process. I find his management style disruptive to technical procedures. I hit send, then went to make myself a sandwich, turkey and Swiss on sourdough, the simple pleasures. My phone rang. Not a text, not an email, an actual phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I stared at the screen for 3 rings, then picked up. Brooks Security Consulting, I said in my most professional voice. Ryan. The voice was thin, desperate, cracking at the edges. Ryan, it's Jordan. Look, I think we got off on the wrong foot here. Who is this? I asked, genuinely confused. I'm sorry, you'll need to go through official channels to request consulting services. It's Jordan Walsh from TechFlow. Look, the system is malfunctioning. We need you to come in. We can discuss reinstating your position, maybe with a raise. I'm sorry, Mr. Walsh, I interrupted. I'm no longer employed by TechFlow Dynamics. I can't discuss internal company matters. Liability issue, you understand. Ryan, please. He sounded like he was about to break. The board is... They're going to crucify me. Just tell me how to fix this. Is there a password written down somewhere? It's biometric authentication, Mr. Walsh. Requires my fingerprint. Unless you have my severed hand, you're out of options. Silence. Then come in. Just come in and unlock it. I'll pay you whatever you want. I sent my terms to your legal department, I said calmly. Once payment clears, I'll be on site within the hour. Until then, I suggest you stop trying to bypass the system. You're corrupting the database indexes. I hung up and blocked the number. At 4:30 p.m., my phone pinged. Banking app notification. Incoming wire transfer. $2,800,000. Status confirmed. They'd paid everything. The emergency fee, the penalty, the weekend premium, more money than I'd made in the previous 4 years combined. I drove to TechFlow. When I arrived, the welcome committee was waiting. Mason looking exhausted, the general counsel looking defeated, and notably absent, Jordan Walsh. "Where's Mr. Walsh?" I asked. "Mr. Walsh has decided to pursue other opportunities," Sterling said from behind them. "Effective immediately." I spent 6 hours in the server room methodically reversing the lockdown. Every command precise, deliberate. Military training never leaves you. When I emerged, the executives were waiting like refugees. "Systems online," I said simply. "Minimal data loss." "Thank you, Ryan," Mason breathed. "We'd like to discuss bringing you back." "I'm not interested in employment," I cut him off. "But Brooks Security Consulting offers retainer services. My terms. I report to the board only. Full architectural authority. Veto power on infrastructure changes." Sterling nodded. "Agreed. What about root access?" I pulled a second YubiKey from my pocket. "Secondary token. Configured for your biometric signature. Keep it in a safe. And your primary?" "I keep that," I said. "Insurance policy." He understood. The trust was gone, replaced by mutually assured destruction. Much more stable than friendship. I walked out of TechFlow at midnight. The Austin air was cool, stars visible above the city lights. I checked my bank account. The balance looked like a phone number. I wasn't going to buy a mansion or quit working. I was going to finish my deck, maybe get that pontoon boat I'd been considering, take my kids fishing when they visited. As I drove home, I thought about systems. People think technology is magic, but it's just logic. Binary, 1 or 0, access granted or denied. Jordan had tried to negotiate with a Boolean and got returned as false. I pulled into my driveway, sat in the truck listening to the engine cool. Tomorrow I'd start building the deck edition. Sunday I'd take the boat out. I grabbed a beer and sat on my back porch listening to the quiet hum of the world running exactly as designed. Best $2.8 million beer I ever tasted.
Into the Women's Guild a couple weeks ago, and like that felt like a big deal, right? Like that's kind of, I mean, I don't know. I'm immediately I want to downplay it and be like, they accept everybody, it's not a big deal. Obviously it's a large guild. Only partners are allowed to like put Women's Guild in their team thing on Twitch. So I'm not allowed to do that, but I can still tell you. And I have like the little banner in my about page, but that's kind of cool, right? So we have the Butterfly team and the Women's Guild. Like, I feel like that's exciting. I'm not sure what's going to happen from it other than me like meeting people and maybe doing some collabs or something one day, but as a part-time streamer, I'm limited in what I can do, but you know, like Ben and I collaborated. We're both in the Butterfly team. Like that helped to be in that crew together, and we get to, you know, organize and celebrate each other. If anything, it's like a support network, right? So I think it's kind of exciting. Yeah. So that was news I meant to share like ages ago, but it just completely slipped my mind. Also, I was confident enough in the number of followers that I have right now to change my follower goal. Right now, we're officially pushing to get to 1K. We're at 9, well, at the start of stream we're at 910. I don't know where we're at now. Maybe less. But I feel like we have enough of a buffer that I'm not going to drop down in followers to like 890 something. So we're pushing for 1K. I don't know what that means. I'm not going to do anything different. I'm just going to, you know, hope for the best, but that's where we're at. Kind of exciting times right now. It's weird. Wait, what's wrong? Why do I need... Can I use this toilet? You're closer to partner than you think? Oh my gosh. No, that's really sweet. I really appreciate the confidence, but the partner requirements are a bit more than I can achieve at this point in time. But you never know what could happen. You never know. I clearly need to recycle or something. Like why is this? This is the downside of the gnomes, because they upgraded my